Turkey, situated between Europe and the Middle East, is a physical and cultural land bridge between East and West. It is because of its strategic location that the capital of Turkey, Constantinople, or present-day Istanbul, has been the centre of many empires over its long history. These empires brought architectural influences from an array of distant cultures and shaped the architectural identity of Constantinople. In 330 AD, Emperor Constantine moved the capital of the Roman Empire from Rome to Byzantium after recognizing a strategic location. This was the beginning of the Byzantine or East Roman Empire and brought its new-founded capital architectural influences from all corners of the known world. Emperor Constantine established schools to teach architects in the new Roman capital. He imported statues from around the Roman Empire and began building structures in the architectural style of the old capital. An example of this is found at Hagia Sophia, Byzantium's largest church, the design of which was likely influenced by the baths of Caracalla in Rome. The population of Constantinople during the Byzantine Empire consisted of Romans, Greeks, Egyptians, Armenians, Franks, Celts, Illyrians, and Huns. This cultural diversity amongst its citizens left a clear imprint on the architecture of the city. An example of this is when Armenian architect Tredat was hired to repair the dome of Hagia Sophia after an earthquake in 989 AD. Another aspect of Byzantine life that affected the architecture of Constantinople was religion. Byzantine society was extremely religious, in which the church was interwoven in all day-to-day activity. The city's highly religious nature is expressed in its architecture, one of the greatest examples being Hagia Sophia. Mariana Lozanovsky writes that Hagia Sophia is a pivotal place, a unique symbol of Christianity in the process of entering a world stage, the new official religion of the Roman Empire as it moved away from Rome to Constantinople. As the city expanded, so did its significance, resulting in Constantinople becoming the political and symbolic centre of the Eastern Mediterranean by the 15th century. Its status, along with its geography and history, allowed Constantinople to become the city of the world's desires. A catastrophe was brought to the city 400 years before its fall by other Christians in Rome. It was the Great Schism in 1054, which was the break in communications between what is now known as the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholic churches. Christianity was divided into two camps, the Greek-speaking, elegant Byzantines and the hard warrior culture of the Latin West. In the last desperate centuries of Christian Constantinople, the once glorious city was buffeted by enemies from both East and West, and yet still produced a golden artistic renaissance. The Crusaders that came to Constantinople started as their allies, but became their rivals as a result. The city was under Latin domination once again. St. Mary of the Mongols is the only Byzantine church still operational in the city. The complex lies behind a high wall and it is not usually open to the public. The structure has been modified a lot more heavily than those converted into mosques, even though it has always remained in Greek hands. It has a tetraconch plan with a central dome enclosed by a tower, which renders it a unicum in the Byzantine architecture of Constantinople. On a much smaller scale, surprisingly anticipates those of many great Ottoman mosques. The Byzantines of 1200 took great pride in the inability of any foreign army ever taking over what they referred to as the Queen of Cities. The triple line of fortifications constructed on the land side in the 5th century had held off attacks by Goths, Persians, Avars, Bulgars, Russians, and especially the Arabs. However, despite its natural defences and sophisticated military technology, the city had only avoided takeover until its last siege by the Ottoman Turks. Constantinople was writing the last tragic chapter in history. The dream of the great Christian city was almost at an end, although it was just the beginning for Istanbul. On the 29th of May 1453, Sultan Muhammad II captured the city of Constantinople after a siege that lasted 53 days. As well as marking the end of Byzantine rule in the Near East, it also marked the end of Byzantine architecture. One of Sultan Muhammad's first acts was to order the Hagia Sophia converted from a church to a mosque. This was the beginning of a path taken by the Ottoman Turks to reshape the city from a Christian stronghold to an Islamic one, and set the precedent for Islamic architecture. Whilst at the Hagia Sophia, he watched as his soldiers were hacking away at the marble floors. Appreciating the grandeur of the Byzantine architecture, He immediately put a halt to this and told his soldiers to be happy with the booty and captives instead. Sultan Muhammad realized that to leave them intact and convert them to his own use was a more powerful tool. It could be purported that Ottoman architecture started with Constantinople. Before then, there was only a slight sense of established Ottoman style within a list of conquered cities. They seemed to appropriate, and this is what they did in Constantinople, leaving major buildings intact and making a few additions, and almost imitating the architecture that was already in place. The famous minarets of Hagia Sophia and the Constantinople skyline are a good example. In Hagia Sophia, alterations were mostly minimal. This was also intentional, and Byzantine mosaics were left for over 200 years. In fact, it was considered customary to leave the physical appearance of major buildings unaltered, perhaps to give the feeling of familiarity whilst expressing the new rule it was under. Even though the Ottomans built new mosques and palaces as a symbolic gesture and to express domination over the Roman Empire it had quashed, it was important to convince the population that it was still their city while it became an Islamic one. The new palaces and mosques had borrowed greatly from the established style of buildings that existed already in Constantinople. To accommodate themselves in Constantinople, the Ottomans converted holy buildings to mosques, built new structures similar to existing major works, such as the Fatih Mosque, and they removed the symbolic sculptures and symbolism of previous religions. After the Black Plague in the 14th century and the preceding Fourth Crusade, the population was severely diminished in Constantinople. The new ruler, the Sultan, had offered up accommodation out of the abandoned houses in the city to people of all different faiths in an effort to repopulate. With this came the urban explosion of Constantinople. Most of the urbanization was centered on trade, and most of the trade was focused at the gates of the city with the incoming tide of merchants. Until the modernization and assimilation into modern-day Istanbul, Ottoman architecture dominated the urban landscape of the city, and its lasting effects have shaped the city's architecture right up until present day. The architecture of modern-day Istanbul has been heavily influenced by the empires that ruled the city in the past. The rich and cultural architectural heritage of the city has since adapted Western architectural elements to the local building conditions in order to develop a distinct national identity and modernize the city. The districts of Fatih and the Eminönü neighborhood to the present-day Istanbul displays repercussions of how architecture has adapted and changed the city of Constantinople, which has affected the cultural engagement and determined the functionality of social production within the urban space. The image of the iconic Turkish house, which is part of the cultural and political narrative as a common Turkish ancestry in the early Republican Turkey, is said to have given a message that all Turks are bound by a common architectural heritage. Though there is a difference in how this image was used then and now, as a result of changing ideologies and contemporary populations. How individuals view their architectural heritage is in flux and subject to manipulation. Our perceptions of the site and its history today are affected by modern ideologies of nationalism and national state fetishism, resulting in active and selective neglect or hostility, which wasn't the case in how we viewed the site in the past. An example of this is how 17th century Ottoman intellectuals have remained neutral whilst writing about the histories of the Roman Empire. There was no categorical rejection within their work. Hagia Sophia provides a symbol of religion. It is a response to the changing faiths of its people and reflects and represents the varying empires that ruled the city and the religions they brought with them. An instance of responsive architecture shifts east from Hagia Sophia to central Fatih, the home of the Grand Bazaar. Indirectly, the role of architecture has created an environment in which a plethora of trade generates gentrification in the production of social space. The lives of the Turkish are filled with several bazaars, a culturally constructed place where buyer and seller trade has claimed the home of socially contested urban space. The Grand Bazaar is one of the oldest and largest covered markets enclosing a space, and within its interior it contains 4,000 shops. The Grand Bazaar, a place to showcase all of Turkey's way of trade, encourages local and international visitors to encompass the varied culture of the city. Despite one's nationalistic attitude, it is apparent that the site cannot be understood to its full extent without studying all of its previous identities. In the ultimate goal to understand Istanbul, one needs to investigate all prior historical eras and the societies that ruled at the time.